Hi, and welcome to The Lowest Crime, the podcast all about the most shocking and sometimes bizarre criminal cases from the Netherlands. I'm Eline, and today we're covering a case that, on the surface, seems almost mundane, but what follows is a medical mystery that quickly turns into a homicide investigation, one that reveals a plan to commit the perfect murder. This is a story of deceit, poison, and betrayal, behind what would become known as the Peanutbutter murder. As with every episode, we will be discussing murder, so listener discretion is advised. And as always, I try my very best to bring you all the known facts, but I am just an amateur podcast creator, so there is always a chance of me making a mistake. Without further ado, let's get into the Peanutbutter murder, or how it is known in Dutch, the Pindakaasmoord. It was a warm, sunny Tuesday on July 22nd, 2003, and an ambulance is rushing to the hospital, sirens blaring. Inside is 30-year-old Judith Notermans from Heerlen. Once they arrive at the Atrium Hospital in Heerlen, no one understands what is happening. They attempt to do a brain scan to hopefully give some insight into what is happening, but during the scan, Judith suddenly goes into cardiac arrest. They desperately try to resuscitate her, but it's no use. Around 5 p.m. that Tuesday, only an hour after she arrived at the hospital, Judith Notermans, previously completely healthy, is declared dead. The shock to her family is enormous, and her boyfriend Bart is inconsolable. Born in 1972 in France, in a village near Paris, Judith worked at RIAG, a regional outpatient mental health service in Sittard, mainly helping children with autism. Judith and her boyfriend Bart, who was 3 years younger, had met each other in 1999 at the Ronde van Heerlen, an annual cycling event. It was love at first sight, and Bart could tell you exactly which chemical processes occur in your brain when you're in love, because Bart is actually trained as a chemist. The two started a relationship and had been together ever since. At the start of 2003, they had moved into a 1930s style home on the edge of Heerlen city centre. They had just started discussing marriage and starting a family, and now their entire future was taken away from them. Judith's memorial card says, "In the final hours of your life, dark clouds gathered and dimmed the bright ray of sunshine that you had always been. Your sudden death, so unimaginable, so senseless, tore you away on the threshold of your future." In the hospital, just after Judith's passing, the painful question of organ donation is discussed with both her boyfriend and her parents. Bart fumbles in Judith's bag for her organ donation card but cannot find it. And after an emotional conversation with hospital staff, Bart and her parents give their consent. The medical team initially concludes that Judith died of natural causes. But because it was such an unexpected death, they decide to perform an autopsy and test her blood for any traces of drugs or poison, just in case. The autopsy itself reveals nothing unusual. Judith's parents are surprised to learn that Bart has asked the funeral director to arrange for a cremation. They had always believed that their daughter wanted to be buried, not cremated. They therefore insist Judith be buried instead. However, their planned funeral on July 28, 2003, will have to be postponed because earlier that Friday, intensivist Metta van der Woude receives a call from a toxicologist. He was the one that examined the blood samples taken from Judith to determine the cause of her cardiac arrest, and he has found traces of an unknown substance that requires further investigation. Van der Woude contacts the municipal medical examiner, who arrives at the hospital immediately with the police. And then she faces one of the hardest phone calls of her life. She has to inform Judith's parents and her boyfriend about the blood test results and tells them that the medical examiner and detectives are on their way. It's decided that Judith's body will be transferred to the Netherlands Forensic Institute, NFI, for further examination. But the experts at the NFI hit a dead end. No suspicious substance is found, and too little blood was taken to perform a full toxicological analysis. But when the news reaches the Atrium Hospital, Van der Woude remembers that an additional set of blood samples had been taken from Judith for her organ donation. 10 tubes of blood had been sent to the university hospital for testing related to the kidney donation. And luckily, it turned out that they had still some left. Exactly enough to do the full toxicological testing that they were unable to perform previously. And when the NFE examined those tubes, the unknown substance is identified as cyanide, a fast-acting poison, changing what seemed like a tragic and unexpected death into a murder investigation. This makes all the alarm bells go off for the police. It quickly becomes clear, after interviewing Judith's co-workers, that Judith had thought her sandwich tasted weird. She had only taken one bite of her typically Dutch sandwich with peanut butter and hagelslag, chocolate sprinkles, after stating that it tasted terrible and immediately throwing the leftovers in the trash. Moments later, panic had broken out in the workplace when Judith had become nauseous and started hyperventilating. It seemed clear that the peanut butter and hagelslag sandwich had something to do with her poisoning, a sandwich that, as was their tradition, had been lovingly prepared by her boyfriend Bart. In a stroke of luck, the garbage bins at work had not been emptied and the leftover sandwich was recovered from the trash. But what started out as luck quickly turned into disappointment when laboratory testing found no traces of cyanide at all, only sprinkles and peanut butter. Meanwhile, Bart, who had been regularly checking in with the police about the progress of the investigation, is also questioned. Detectives aren't convinced by his explanations, so they decide to search the home he shared with Judith on the Berkerweg in Heerlen. However, nothing unusual is found. But when officers later visit Bart's workplace, where he works as a lab technician for a fertilizer and soil improvement supplier, they find 2 bottles in his desk drawer containing chemicals that could potentially be dangerous in the wrong context. Bart tells the police that he was only keeping those bottles in his desk to keep them safe. Apparently, they were sometimes stolen during tours of the company. Upon examining his computer, they found that shortly before Judith's death, he had been looking up how certain chemicals work. But given the nature of his job, this can't automatically be considered suspicious. What does make Bart suspicious, however, is that it turned out he regularly arranged sex dates online. The combination of circumstances made him so suspicious that 5 days after Judith's death he was officially arrested. Family and friends are stunned. Judith and Bart loved each other. They were such a good couple. His first lawyer tells reporters that his client is utterly shocked by the arrest. Then, on September 19th, almost 2 months after Judith's death, they are even more shocked when Bart confesses. Yes, he poisoned his girlfriend by spreading theobromine and sodium azide on a piece of bread. And, by sheer misfortune, that was the first bite Judith took, which is why they did not find any traces left over on the pieces of bread in the trash. He has brought the conviction upon himself, Bart's lawyer tells journalists. And he's right. If Bart had said nothing at all, he most likely would have gotten away with murder. One of the substances he claimed to have used, sodium azide, can stop the body from absorbing oxygen within just a few minutes of ingestion. It's no coincidence that people who Google this substance are immediately directed to suicide prevention hotlines. Van der Woude explains, sodium azide is also known as Substance X, the so-called suicide powder that, so it has been claimed, can help you to peacefully fall asleep. But this is a great misconception. After ingestion, the body experiences extreme oxygen deprivation, leading to symptoms such as hyperventilation, vomiting, dizziness, seizures, chest pain, and eventually a coma and death. Definitely not what one would call a peaceful death. The poison had been smuggled from Bart's workplace just a week before the act, which he hid behind a washing machine. Strikingly, investigators overlooked it during their initial house search. A day after the police had ransacked his home, Bart discarded the poison in some bushes. During his confession, he points the police to the exact spot he had discarded it, and later the police indeed find it there. Slowly but surely, the pieces of the puzzle start to fall into place. For example, why Bart had given perfume to the funeral director who collected Judith's body from the hospital. Most likely, he had hoped that the scent would mask the almond-like smell that appears when sodium azide reacts with bodily fluids and converts into cyanide. During the trial, Bart was evaluated by a psychologist and a psychiatrist. They concluded that Bart suffers from a pervasive developmental disorder, a mild form of autism. It limited his ability to communicate and engage socially, making it extremely difficult for him to resolve conflicts in the relationship. According to the report, as tensions rose over Judith's wish for a marriage and children, Bart increasingly felt trapped and socially pressured, with limited social tools to handle the situation. And the psychologist noted that Bart's disorder partially influenced his actions. Feeling trapped in the relationship and unable to cope, Bart saw poisoning as the easiest way out. At least then I wouldn't have to talk about anything, he said, also alluding to his secret sexual escapades. The psychiatrist also warned that Bart is likely to commit another act of violence in a future relationship. Taking that into account, the public prosecutor demanded 12 years in prison plus TBS, mandatory psychiatric treatment. The prosecutor called it a carefully planned and ruthlessly executed murder, and notes that it can't be ruled out that Bart may have poisoned someone before. In court, a woman named Ellen was also mentioned. This was allegedly an ex-girlfriend of Bart's, who had left him angry after an argument and, later that evening, had died in a car crash. The public prosecutor hints that Bart may have intended for Judith to eat her sandwich in the car, as she usually did, become ill, and have an accident, a scenario no one would ever have considered a poisoning. Fate, however, had other plans, and that day Judith ate her sandwich at her work instead of her car. There is, however, doubt about whether this Ellen ever existed at all. The prosecution could never trace her, and there are no matching deaths in the region. Bart later admits that he invented her because Judith kept talking about her ex, and he wanted a story of his own. In fact, he had never even had a real relationship he could talk about, showcasing again his lack of social skills to rather make up a story than tell the full truth. In court, Bart watched as an emotional statement from the family was read aloud. "We still see you in our nightmares, standing by the bed while the doctors fought for Judith's life. You were there and you said nothing. We will always keep searching for the answer to the question, why?" Later in the session, Bart expresses deep remorse. Crying, he said, "I still can't believe I did something so terrible." He also tells the court that he made the decision to poison Judith 2 days before her death. After an argument, Judith had left, and Bart felt abandoned. Even when she returned shortly after, his feelings didn't change. It was too late. The switch was flipped. My decision was made, he said. When the Maastricht court initially sentenced Bart to 6 years in prison plus TBS with compulsory treatment, the prosecution appealed, arguing that the sentence was too lenient. And their appeal was successful. The sentence was later increased to 8 years plus TBS. The court highlighted that Bart had acted in a planned and methodical way, grossly betraying the victim's trust, and had remained silent during Judith's final hours, with her grieving parents by her side. The court noted that if he had revealed what he had done, her life might have still been saved. Intensivist Metta van der Woude, however, doubts that. "I can't imagine we could have done anything for Judith at that point. The chance of surviving that dose of sodium azide is virtually zero." She also mentions how this case definitely changed the way she works. She still thinks back of this case from time to time. She says, "I've become more cautious and alert when faced with an unexpected death. I'm more likely to call in a forensic specialist and more inclined to preserve extra blood from the deceased, so it can be tested later, just in case." Judith's death has left a deep impression on her and her colleagues. It was a young woman slipping away right before our eyes. We saw the grief and panic of her parents, and then there was her boyfriend at her bedside, so sorrowful and involved, all the while knowing that morning he had been the one to prepare a poisonous sandwich for her. It's still a chilling thought. In her final hours, we were literally talking to her murderer. It's absolutely horrifying. What has become of Bart since his sentence is unclear. It is known, though, that after his TBS treatment, he left the province and now has a girlfriend and a child. The latter is particularly cruel when you take into account that Judith's desire to have children was exactly the reason he poisoned her. And that is it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. If you appreciated this episode, please leave a like or a comment or subscribe to the podcast. It always helps me out a ton. Thanks again so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.